Right, today we're going to be taking a look at the new unit we're going to be studying for Buzz 4, which is really more of a hands-on real-life approach to the way we're going to be looking at business. So we're going to take a look at all the factors that affect the economic environment and examine the relationship between business and that environment. So ultimately, we're going to start with chapter 21, and I'm going to give you the introduction from the textbook, and I'll talk you through the presentation and all the key terms and concepts you need to know. So this chapter explains the key macroeconomic variables that affect business organizations and identifies trends in these variables. It assesses how changes to the macroeconomic variables might affect business organizations and evaluates the strategies businesses might deploy in response. The key macroeconomic variables reviewed include the business cycle, economic growth, interest rates, exchange rates, inflation, and unemployment. So the chapter also assesses the effects of the globalization of markets and developments in emerging markets on business organizations and the strategies that business might deploy in response. All right, this does sound like a lot, but we're going to be going through quite a few examples and quite a few lessons actually on this material. So don't think you're going to be taking it all in at once. We're going to break it down into small manageable chunks, and we'll start with PESTLE analysis. Okay, PESTLE analysis by definition, is a framework for assessing the likely impact of the political, economic, social, technological, legal, and environmental factors in the external environment of a business. Sometimes called pest analysis, the legal element uh, is usually being included in that case, then again in the analysis of the political environment, and then they also include the environmental element in the social environment. So don't really need to worry about that, but let's take a look at well, each of these in turn. So pestle, we know each of these stands for a different thing. Right? Each of the letters stands for a different thing. So pestle, start with P. Political factors. Right? Political factors include government economic policies, government social policies, and the extent of government intervention. Right? So if the government, for example, deregulates industry, that would be an example of political intervention. If they make it easier to compete or give maybe they have some past legislation to that favors corporations running more freely. Those are political factors. Also, in PESTLE, we have economic factors. Right, so economic factors include the business cycle, interest rates, exchange rates, the level of inflation, the level of unemployment, and the membership of the United Kingdom into of the with the European Union. Thirdly, we have social factors. Right, these are ethical issues, the impact of pressure groups, the influence of different stakeholders, and changing lifestyles. To give you an idea, social factors are part of the reason why I'm doing this presentation and recording it and uploading it online. Now, I believe things are changing the way students are learning. So again, adapting to changing lifestyles, the way people do things. Okay, another set of factors to keep in mind is the technological factors. New products, new processes, the impact of change, and the costs of change. Right. So if we take a look at the MP3 player, yeah, back a generation in my age, not too long ago, a lot of people were worried about their Discman, carrying around their CDs with them and playing their CDs more so than the MP3 player. And before that, you had the cassette player. People used to walk around with Walkmans and headphones. Then before that, I don't know. That was way back before me. But it's gone from cassettes to CDs and now MP3 players. It's revolutionized the way we listen to music. Next factor we have legal factors. Now this is kind of tied into political, so you really need to be careful about how you clarify on this. Legal factors include legislation, right? Anything passed uh, the by the government involving legislation around industry. Again, that falls under legal factors. And finally, we have external or the environmental influence. These are all issues that have to do with the environment. So this could be, for example, an issue with going green, um, companies using more recycled products in production. Right? These are things that they need to keep in mind. They'll have different issues that they have to face and manage their business around. All right, so let's take a look at British Airways. Right, so British Airways, major organization. We've talked about it several times. We'll do a PESTLE analysis on BA. So let's take a look. All right, I'm showing you here what you would need to do to achieve an A grade, B grade, and C grade before we go into this PESTLE. So you can see that to get a C, just describe influences. So look at the PESTLE analysis and describe how they influence BA. To achieve a B, you need to analyze how BA could respond. So let's take a look at what they could do in response to these factors. And finally, achieving an A requires you to make recommendations to the business. Weigh some options, look at their advantages, disadvantages, and then make a final recommendation to the business. All right, so a PESTLE analysis for British Airways could look like this. All right, and I'll slowly go through each one of these in turn. The 9/11 terrorist attack would affect the political aspect of the PESTLE analysis. It's changed the whole political climate since September 11th, 2001. All right, so British Airways is impacted by that. We went through in class some methods of how they could um, you know, change the way they're running their business to tackle that issue. All right, the second factor is economic. So a new environment tax is introduced. So if the new environment tax is introduced, we discussed in class again options and things that British Airways could do. They could either pass that cost on to customers, or they could find a way to manage it within the organization by cutting costs. Thirdly, we have social factors. Right, social factors including people taking more holidays abroad. Right, people are traveling more, people are flying abroad more. What could British Airways do in response to that? How can they capitalize on that market? The fourth point, technological. Now you can book tickets directly over the internet. You don't need to go to a travel agent. You don't need to book through a third party. You can go to straight to the airline. So that is something that British Airways does need to keep in mind. I think most airlines, if not all, you can book online directly over the internet. Right? So if one airline's offering that and one isn't, it's much easier to obviously choose the one that is. Another aspect we want to look at is the legal factor of the extra checks at customs. Right? British Airways knows that their passengers are flying with them, and they're well aware of the extra checks at customs. What can they do to address that? What is it that they could do with their processes, how people arrive and leave the airport, that could help ease that burden? And finally, there's the external factors. British Airways has a lot of budget airlines to compete with. Some of the ones we mentioned in class, Ryanair, Monarch, and I believe EasyJet. Heard a lot of praise for EasyJet. Ryanair was about in the middle, and Monarch, both classes, I think, we're not too keen on flying with Monarch. So again, these are things that British Airways has to deal with. One solution we recommended was that British Airways focus on their high quality and market accordingly. And that would be a change in business strategy in response to this factor. All right, so that's just a really brief introduction to PESTLE analysis and taking a look at what we're going to be going into further this term. So what I want you to do is remember always, all businesses are affected by things in the outside world that are beyond their control. Okay, so all businesses affected by things in the outside world that are beyond their control. They can't do anything about it. You have to just roll with the punches, but you also need to have strategies in place to help you navigate through those challenges. Successful business will know how to respond to these things. So exactly what I've just said. You need to know what you're doing to respond to those changes. Things go on outside of our control all the time. And as much as a successful business knows how to respond to things that change that are beyond their control, a successful student must know too. Right? So when things are changing in your outside world and beyond your control, you need to know how to navigate those waters. All right, so that's a wrap for us today on PESTLE analysis. Any questions, you do know where to find me. Thank you.